It was our anniversary, and we were celebrating with a trip to a luxurious couples resort in the Caribbean. I had planned everything meticulously, wanting to make this vacation perfect for my wife, but as we boarded the plane, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. We were distant, disconnected. The passion that used to burn between us had dwindled into embers. As we settled into our suite at the resort, I hoped that the change of scenery would rekindle the spark. We sipped champagne on our private balcony, watching the waves crash against the shore. It was beautiful, idyllic even, but there was an awkwardness in the air that I couldn't ignore. When I brought up my concerns to my wife later that night, she brushed them off with a forced smile. She assured me that it was just stress from work and that everything would be fine once we relaxed. But things didn't get better. We spent our days lounging by the pool or exploring the island. But there was a constant tension between us. Our conversations were filled with awkward silences and shallow small talk. One evening at dinner, as we sat across from each other in stony silence, a woman approached our table. She was stunning, tall and elegant, with sun-kissed skin and long blonde hair cascading down her back. "Is this seat taken?" she asked with a friendly smile. I glanced at my wife, who shrugged nonchalantly before turning her attention back to her phone. "No, please," I said, gesturing toward the empty chair. The woman introduced herself as Sarah and explained that she was also vacationing alone after a recent breakup. She exuded confidence and charm as she regaled us with stories of her travels and adventures. I found myself captivated by her presence, her sparkling blue eyes, her infectious laugh, and for a moment it felt like all the weight of our failing relationship had lifted. After dinner, my wife excused herself, claiming exhaustion from the day's activities. I offered to walk her back to our suite, but was met with a dismissive wave. "I'm just going to bed," she said with a yawn. "You stay and have fun." I hesitated for a moment before accepting her offer. I returned to the bar and found Sarah waiting for me with 2 drinks in hand. "Your wife seems lovely," she said as I sat down next to her. "Yeah, she's great," I replied, unsure of how to fully articulate my feelings. "She seems tired," Sarah observed. "Maybe you should let her rest while you enjoy some well-deserved relaxation." Her words struck a chord within me. It felt like she saw right through me, that she understood the struggles I was facing in my marriage. We spent the rest of the evening talking and laughing, completely engrossed in each other's company. It felt so easy, so effortless, and for the first time in a long time, I felt desired. As the night wore on and the drinks continued to flow, our conversation took a more intimate turn. We talked about our desires, our fantasies, things that I had never shared with anyone before. There was an undeniable sexual tension between us that hung thick in the air. Just as things were about to escalate further, my conscience tugged at me like an unwelcome guest. Guilt washed over me as I thought of my wife asleep in our suite just steps away. "I should go," I stammered as I stood up from the bar stool. Sarah looked at me for a moment with disappointment etched across her face before nodding understandingly. "Of course," she said softly. "It was wonderful getting to know you." I thanked her for the conversation and made my way back to the suite, my mind filled with conflicting emotions as I slipped into bed next to my wife. I couldn't help but feel a pang of regret for leaving Sarah behind at the bar. But as I looked at my wife's peaceful face, I knew that I had made the right choice. No matter how disconnected we were, she was still my wife, and that meant something as the week continued. I found myself spending more and more time with Sarah. We would meet for breakfast by the beach or take long walks along the shoreline. Our conversations became increasingly flirtatious and laced with innuendo. Every encounter left me craving more, her touch, her kiss. Her body pressed against mine, and although we never crossed that line into infidelity, the temptation was undeniable. On our last night at the resort, as we watched the sunset over the ocean, she turned to me and asked a question that caught me off guard. "Have you ever wondered what it would be like to be truly desired?" she asked, her voice dripping with seduction. I felt a shiver run down my spine as her words hung in the air. In that moment, all thoughts of my wife vanished from my mind. All that remained was an overwhelming desire for this woman standing before me. Before I could gather my thoughts or form a coherent sentence, she closed the distance between us and kissed me passionately. It was electric, a surge of desire coursing through my veins. I was intoxicated by her touch, my head spinning with a mixture of guilt and ecstasy. Our lips moved in perfect synchronization as the world around us faded into oblivion. She pulled away, her eyes filled with desire and a mischievous glimmer. "Come to my room," she whispered, her voice like velvet against my skin. My heart raced in my chest as I considered her proposition. This was the moment of truth, a choice that would forever alter the course of my life. Should I succumb to the allure of this stranger, forsaking everything I had built with my wife? Or should I walk away and cling to the remnants of our crumbling marriage? 1,000 thoughts swirled in my head, but in that moment it felt like the universe had conspired to bring us together, the stars aligned. Fate intervened, and I surrendered myself to the intoxicating pull of desire. I nodded wordlessly, unable to form any semblance of coherent thought. She took me by the hand and led me through the dimly lit corridors of the resort, our footsteps muffled by the weight of secrecy. We arrived at her suite, a luxurious oasis bathed in moonlight and scented with possibilities. With each passing second, there was no turning back from this precipice we found ourselves teetering upon. Sarah pushed open the door and pulled me inside with an urgency that matched my own. We stood in silence for a moment as our eyes met, to souls entwined in a dance of lust and longing. Without a word, she reached up and began slowly unbuttoning her blouse, revealing creamy skin kissed by moonlight. Her nimble fingers moved with purpose as she methodically shed each layer until she stood before me in nothing more than her bra and panties. I drank in every inch of her naked form, desire coursing through my veins like liquid fire. She approached me with a predatory grace, her gaze never wavering from mine. With a flick of her wrist, my own shirt was discarded on the floor, followed shortly by my pants and underwear. There we stood, stripped bare in body and soul, ready to indulge in the forbidden fruits of our desires. She closed the distance between us once again, her hands tracing a path down my chest until they found their destination. A moan escaped my lips as she began to caress me with a firm yet gentle touch. Pleasure rippled through every fiber of my being as I surrendered myself to her expert ministrations. In one fluid motion, she removed her bra and tossed it aside. Freeing her chest from my hungry gaze, I leaned in, savoring the taste and texture as I touched her skin with my tongue. Her breath hitched in response, urging me to explore further. I traced a path of hot kisses down her stomach until I reached the apex of her desire, yearning for attention. My tongue danced across her sensitive skin, eliciting moans of pleasure that filled the room like an intoxicating melody. She arched her back and grabbed fistfuls of my hair, pulling me closer with each passing second, a rhythmic dance of passion and need. Her moans grew louder, more urgent, signaling that she was teetering on the edge of ecstasy. With a cry of pleasure, her body shuddered with the force of her release, and I reveled in the knowledge that I was the one who had brought her to this pinnacle of pleasure. She pulled me up from my kneeling position, a look of raw desire etched across her face. "I want you," she whispered, her voice husky with need. In one swift motion, she pushed me onto the bed, positioning herself above me. She looked into my eyes as she slowly sank down on me until we were fully joined in a passionate embrace. We moved together in perfect synchrony, our bodies molded as one, a testament to the undeniable chemistry that existed between us. With each movement, I felt the weight of my inhibitions melt away, replaced by an insatiable hunger for more. Her hands roamed across my chest and shoulders, leaving a trail of fire in their wake. I gripped her hips tightly, guiding her movements as we lost ourselves in a sea of unbridled passion. Time ceased to exist as we surrendered to the intoxicating rhythm of our desires. The world outside this room faded into obscurity, and all that mattered was the here and now, this moment of raw vulnerability and unadulterated pleasure. Our bodies careened toward the edge of oblivion. Sarah's moans grew louder with each passing second, driving me closer to the brink of ecstasy. With a symphony of impassioned cries, we tumbled over that precipice together, to souls united in a shared ecstasy that rocked us to our very core. Waves of pleasure washed over us like a tidal surge, leaving us breathless and sated in its wake. We collapsed onto the bed in a tangle of limbs and damp skin, our bodies still humming with the aftershocks of our mutual release. For a moment, there was only the sound of our ragged breaths punctuating the air like a song of satisfaction as I lay there, basking in the afterglow of our tryst. A familiar pang of guilt washed over me like an unwelcome,